Hello and welcome. I'm JD, and today we're going to go through part one of all the non-OSP related changes. We'll likely look for a second video in this generic update series for the major update that we're about to encounter. And then if I get around to it, time permitting, because I'm a little bit time poor these days, I'll then go and have a look at the OSP, and we'll see how I can break that down into easy to consume a piece of information. The first change that I want to look at is player customization. So if you come up on the top right of the main menu and you click on your player profile, you now have the ability to save color schemes. So this is something that has been widely requested. And for anyone who's playing in the role-playing servers, or you want to play within the ANS or the OSP colors, as well as your own, you'll now be able to do that. When you first load in after the update, you will see the ANS logo. I would like to see the developers add the OSP colors and logo as well, but you can do that yourself. I will show the RBG colors for that in a second. So how does it work? Well, it works the same way as you normally would. So you can select your hull badge. For example, here is the OSP colors. Here's the OSP badge. Let me select that. You can change to the OSP prefix, which at this point I'm just going to call OSP because I can't remember what it actually is. And now because I have the lore document open, I can look at the different colors. So the blue color is on screen 6693-129 as the primary, and then as the trim 242-145. So once you've completed that and you want to save that profile, then all you need to do is find an empty slot or a slot that is currently occupied, and on the downwards pointing arrow, select save current colors to this slot. Confirm through the overwrite, and it may take a second, or you may need to do it again. There it goes. Save before I needed to do anything. You can now access that color scheme. So if I confirm out, you can see that it now applies, and I can come back in at any time, and through the upwards arrow, I can revert back to my original scheme, and that brings the badges across as well. You can also access this from the single player lobbies. So here I am in a local skirmish match, and I can change to the OSP, or I can change back to my own independent colors. As long as Team 1 has all of the same faction and Team 2 has all of the same faction, whether they all be OSP or they all be ANS or Alliance, when this uniform teams function is on, then that's all that matters. You can see if I deselect that, that's going to enable us all to immediately play. Over in the fleet editor, we previously were introduced with a points cost breakdown. So you could see the points cost and the breakdown as a percentage, as well as a hard number for a number of different categories. That is now applied to ships along the top bar. So if I hover over the ANZ, the Amber Whack, which is a randomized name and potentially quite interesting, you can see that 620 points and the cost breakdown. So the more ships that you have up there now, you'll be able to see what that points value is, as well as what the breakdown. We have new movement options. You can now clear the heading and the role independently, as opposed to what you previously had to do was clear both of them, in which case you then had to come and reset the heading and you had to reset the role. If you're happy with your heading but you want to remove the role because the threat's no longer there, well then all you do is come into the movement order as you normally do. You click clear role, you'll see that it disappeared, and then the ship will align to the heading. We can't particularly see it, but clear heading and clear role, ideally you would be able to have mapped to this keybinds as well, but that may be something for a future minor update. Track quality is now displayed onto the ships that you are observing when you click on them. So we previously went through a tutorial video of which ships have the best track quality based on the radars, and that the sensor network which displays that is through all the communications network. So the ship that I'm selecting, if it has the best track or the best radar, it is going to then provide it to the Grief of Lolly and the Sharp of Tamar, as long as their communications are all working and functional. However, that was still a bit of a guess. Now what you can do when you've clicked on a ship and you come over to one of the enemy ships, I'll scroll over here, you can see the track quality. And the track quality is located next to the track number. And the track quality ranges on a scale from 1 to 15, with 15 being the best. Now, how that particularly works mechanic-wise, I'm not 100% sure, and something I'll no doubt find out along the way. And so we can see that the track quality has been changing whilst we've been talking. It's gone from track quality of a 12 to 10 to 11. And that's obviously got to do with the way that the ship is maneuvering, because we are still adjusting, or we were still adjusting our heading on the heavy cruiser. So this should now give you a little bit more indication of how good your track quality is in comparison to the other radars about. Right, some changes to the electronic warfare visual indicator. So this was one of those things that the developers announced a long time ago. Last year, we covered it in a very small video. Previously, you would get the big red jumping down icons jumping everywhere. That could be hard to see through of what was an actual track. What was designed to give a visual game representation of how that jamming was occurring, made it hard for the ship to identify which ones were the actual real targets when they were close enough to identify them. So this has been rectified in two ways. So first of all, I've got the Grief of Lolly firing its electronic warfare at the 3 targets in front. And if I come across to them, you can see, once I select them, a few different things. One, all the yellow icons will now jump around on the screen, indicating that electronic warfare is coming from that general direction. So you can see that even as I move around a little bit, the icons are still sort of in a fairly wide cone. But the other part too is you can now identify that a line of bearing for jamming will now be drawn from the location of where the target ship is, or the ship that you are selecting, and then it will be broadcast somewhere through that jamming within a degree of error. So here you can see that whilst the jamming ship is the one in the middle, that the line of jamming is somewhat pointing in that direction. So that was implemented for one specific reason, is that sometimes you could be cut through all the jamming, but at the end of the day, you could fight a battle without ever seeing the enemy. And it could be quite frustrating, particularly if you were new, not to know even where to start to aim, home on jamming missiles or anything such as where it may be coming from. So this will now give you a rough indication of where that electronic warfare is being displayed from, or in the terms of the blanket or radar jamming, and therefore allows you to take actions in order to either get yourself out of that position or counter that jamming through whatever means you may have. So changes to the DC board, there are twofold. So first, we have the emergency reactor shutdown. So this will initiate an emergency shutdown of all reactors and drives, and your crew will take 30 seconds to complete the shutdown procedure, after which time all reactor overload events will be cleared. All power plant modules which were in the process of overloading when the shutdown was completed will require a restore to bring them back online, and it will take an additional 30 seconds to bring the remaining systems back online once a shutdown is ordered, cannot be countermanded. So what this means is we've all been in the scenario where you've been peppered, maybe you've been able to duck behind cover, but you're going to effectively go critical because your teams aren't going to be able to put everything out, and you've got to sit there for about a minute and a half before you explode. If you've watched the channel, you've probably seen my battleships do that at least 3 times, I think. So what you can do now is you can force this shutdown. So if I click and hold and confirm for 3 seconds, then you can see that a initiation timer will occur. It's going to take 30 seconds for my ship to completely power down. And you can see that we've now got a low power and our drives are disabled. So by doing this, the risk is that you are going to be a sitting duck. So either have your other ships to protect it, your PD is going to, because your PD is going to go offline, your ECM is going to go offline, your chart's going to go offline. However, if you are able to limp away somewhere and hide behind a rock for a minute and someone else can take the brunt of it, then you will be able to come back into the fight. One of the key aspects there was all power plant modules which were in the process of overloading when the shutdown was completed will require a restore to bring back online. So even though you may bring all your ship back online and you clear all the emergency events that would otherwise, or the critical events which would otherwise destroy the ship and cause it to explode in the bright blue cloud that we all love, if, for example, this reactor had been part of that critical event, it will now be offline and I'll have to expend one of my restores to bring it back. So for ships that may not have any restores left, it's still a bit of a death sentence unless you have sufficient backups in order to maintain and bring some of those back online, or just accept that you won't be at full power. If you've got a battleship and you've got 2 reactors, one goes down, then you'd be okay. What changed to the damage control board is that now when you have multiple debuffs that are affecting a module, that you will see the count of how many are actually affecting. So at the moment there's a fire and it's only one debuff being that fire. then you will be able to see that on the plant control center. If you have, say, 2 or 3 or 4 or 5, say you've got a magazine cooking off or a fuel line explosion, as well as fires, as well as additional debuffs, you will see that number next to the component. And then as they go away, you'll see that go down. It'll flash when it increases or decreases, so you have that visualization on how many debuffs you actually have. So an update to the Intel mechanic, if you select a ship and then you hover over one of the tracks, on that line where it says Intel condition 100%, that's still the same. And it says point defense, that's 100%. That's still the same as the previous Intel mechanic, based on errors and the best possible intelligence effort, and the best possible intelligence effort available for the team, or individually based on the whether you have an Intel Center or a CIC. But you'll now see in between condition and point defense is another number in brackets. Now that's not a percentage number, that is a hard number, and that will tell you how many debuffs that ship currently has. When you're firing on that battleship and it says, it's got a condition of maybe like 30%, and you factor in your intelligence error, then it will say next to it, it's got 15 debuffs. It'll have a fuel line leak, magazine explosions, multiple fires, but it'll then have the same principles apply as the Intel mechanic occurs. That number there will be the true amount of debuffs minus, plus or minus the Intel error of the detecting intelligence effort of the ship or ships. Again, depending on the whether you have just a CIC or an Intel center. Hope I've made that clear. I think I waffled a little bit there, but now you'll be able to see. But to summarize, you can now see the amount of debuffs that are on a ship based on your intelligence effort, and the intelligence mechanic doesn't change at all. All right, so a new option for the point defense button down the bottom. So we previously had auto, you had manual, and you now have DEDI, which I think stands for don't engage, don't intercept. And what this will mean is any turrets that are dual purpose. So if you're the Alliance and you've got a Mark 61 or a Mark 62, and you've got HE and RPF loaded, and you're not firing because you're not shooting anything from the HE, then your turrets would automatically load RPF in response to missiles if they didn't have an order. Now what you can say is, look, I actually don't want that turret to engage as part of my point defense network. You're going to put DEDI on, and that way your 100 mils will not switch to RPF, and they will engage with HE or AP or whatever you've previously loaded when you want to engage with those 100 mils. And just a point on that, so I've clarified it. Your point defense turrets will still engage as point defense turrets, but your dual purpose weapons, as the little text box on the screen says, will be left idle. So just something to be aware of there. All right, one other change that I think I'll cover off here is ELINT tracks now give you a little bit more information. So for example, you can see out here that there are 4 ELINT tracks because I've got 4 ships out there. However, one of those ships is providing a lock onto our middle ship, being the ANZ Red of Lorinda. So what occurs now is that ELINT tracks, when you hover over them, it'll say ELINT, and let me just pause it so it doesn't jump around. It'll say ELINT, and then it's going to tell you the type of sensor that that ELINT track is looking at. So here you can see that most of them are search track, and search track, because that's picking up all of these 3 destroyers, which are simply sitting there passively getting their radar emissions detected by the electronic intelligence. However, the Corvette has been providing the lock on our second ship, or ship number 2, and therefore its ELINT is saying fire control. So now you can tell which one of these ELINT tracks here is providing fire control as opposed to simply search and track. Just a little bit more information to enable you to make battlefield decisions. So just before we end, I think one thing that everyone's always interested to know about is what are the changes coming to rail guns, as the OSP will have their own flavor, as will the Alliance. And so that's something I'm not going to cover here. That should all come out by Mazer through a devlog, who will explain a lot of reasoning, and I think whatever the changes are. Now, some of you may see that as a foreshadowing. I'm just telling you why I've omitted it from here, because he wants to address it, and he'll frankly do a better job than me, because I haven't really kept up with this testing phase at the moment. So I'm not really sure of what the rail changes are, or to the extent, other than just reading lines and patch notes. I haven't really had a hands-on feel with them, and I haven't really got the knowledge to explain to you what they would even be without probably screwing it up. So once he's announced it and I wrap my head around whatever the rail changes are, then we can discuss it here. And yeah, hopefully the railguns sort of come back into their own again, because it is a good weapon. It was a little bit overbearing previously, and it always is a hot topic. But it is a tool in the arsenal for the game, and it's sometimes nice to play long range support because they have one of the cool animations in the game as well. So there should be a devlog out at some point, maybe in the next week, maybe just after release, and we'll get that information. Then we'll do an update and include that in the second part of this general updates for the and my mind is going because it's getting a little bit late at night, the OSP faction. All right, so thanks for watching and take care.